Mary is an economist in the Planning and Innovation Division at the Oregon Department of Energy. She received her PhD from the University of Oregon in 2021, and prior to beginning at the Oregon Department of Energy, worked as an assistant professor of economics at the University of Alaska in Anchorage. Her research can be found in the Journal of Economic History and Applied Economics. So, Mary, wherever you are, thank you for coming and being a speaker with us today. Our other speaker is Nina Carlson, the Governmental Affairs Manager at Northwest Natural. And I've had the honor and privilege to work with Nina in the past when I was on the board of directors, both in the Metro and the state for the Home Builders Association. Nina has been very involved with that group, advocating and lobbying for increased housing, less regulation, more buildable lands, and I know that you're continuing in those efforts. And every year, the highlight of the summer is the Northwest Natural Street of Dreams. So I know we'll be getting more information about that as we approach the summer months. But a little bit of background information about Nina. She oversees Northwest Natural's governmental affairs and economic development for the Metro region, a graduate from the University of Washington. She's a long Washington County resident who started her career as a local real estate broker. She presently serves on the Westside Economic Alliance, Clackamas County Business Alliance, Columbia County Economic Team, and on the Governmental Affairs Committee for the Portland Business Alliance. And as I mentioned earlier, as also on the Governmental Affairs team for the Home Builders Association. So if we could have a welcome hand for both Mary and Nina, that would be great. Is there anything I've missed, Sherry? Have I got it all? Okay, she gives me the thumb up. All right, well, with that being said, Mary, we want to start out with you.
Right. Thank you so much for having me. Is everyone able to hear me all right if I have the mic there? Okay, great. I am Mary Capriva. I am an economist at the Oregon Department of Energy, and today I'm going to be presenting some of the findings from our 2024 Biennial Energy Report. Because I'm not sure how much this audience interacts with the Oregon Department of Energy on a day-to-day basis, I thought I'd start off with a little introduction slide to our department. So the Oregon Department of Energy, or ODO, as we like to call ourselves for short, has kind of this mission of helping Oregonians make informed decisions and maintain a resilient, maintain a resilient and affordable energy system. And there's many ways that we go about doing this. Kind of number one is by providing data-driven analysis of what's going on in the state. We also try and be a place where we can convene problem-solving discussions and help folks kind of get on the same page about energy. We also do education, so things like this that are very fun and my favorite part of my job. There's a part of ODO that does some regulation and oversight for siting of new energy projects. And then finally, we also run some energy programs and assistance. So if anyone here has ever thought about getting a heat pump for their house or business or a new electric vehicle, some of that stuff comes through our department as well. One part of our work, in kind of addition to everything that I mentioned there, is every 2 years doing our biennial energy report. And again, this is maybe a lesser known report than some other things that you're perhaps more familiar with in the Oregon government, but the kind of goal of this report is to just give Oregonians and local governments and kind of anyone who needs to learn some information about our energy, some up-to-date information about what our energy use is, kind of what are some interesting new topics that are coming up in energy, what are new technologies that folks could maybe learn or, are interested in learning a little bit more about. And so this report kind of tries to cover as much as we can of all of that. If you go to our website and check it out, you'll see it's a bit of a behemoth of a report. I'm not sure how many people read it cover to cover, but we do try and create it so that each of the sections of the report can be kind of taken out individually, and you don't need to read the report in its entirety to be able to learn about a specific topic that you're interested in. The report as a whole is split up into kind of 4 sections. The first section talks about just our energy in the state. So energy by the numbers gives a breakdown of how we're using energy, where the energy that we use comes from, what people are paying for energy, kind of all the basics of the data that you might be interested in on energy use here in Oregon. Our second section looks into new or emerging technologies and gives a quick kind of 101 level explainer on some of these new technologies. If you go back to past BRRRs, you'll see that there's usually a long list of technologies that we're talking about. This year we had only a couple, so we focused on geothermal and fusion power. So if you have any interest in those, I would recommend checking those sections out. We then have kind of a whole set of Energy 101s, which are energy topics that are kind of new conversations that are coming up in the news, things that you might be hearing about in the legislature, anything that's kind of up and coming and of the moment, we cover in these Energy 101s. And then finally, we have some updates on where our projects are and kind of what we've been up to. And because that would be a ton to cover in one presentation in 30 minutes, I'm focusing in on just a few of those. So I'll talk first a little bit about how Oregon uses and generates energy as a whole, electricity as well as other energy sources. I'll talk a little bit about energy costs, and then focus in on a couple of our Energy 101s related to rate increase drivers for recent. I'm going to focus on electricity rate increases and then talk about energy resilience a bit. And then finally, I'll do a quick update on some of the things that we're doing at Odo, in case anyone's interested in kind of following up or following along with those. Okay, this first graphic is a lot. I'm gonna walk through it quickly, but really what this diagram is showing is like all of the energy that we use in Oregon, where it comes from and how it flows through our system. So you'll see on the left side of the graphic that we have energy bucketed into energy that we import that's non-electricity, energy that we produce here in the state, and then electricity that we import. And as you go across this diagram, which we call a Sankey diagram, you'll see kind of how that gets broken up across different energy sources, and then how it gets used by consumers. And then kind of the final total of what gets used and what goes to waste. You might notice right away that a lot goes to waste, and that's just because all of our systems, unfortunately, aren't as efficient as every single electron or every single bit of energy gets to the end use. Things come off as heat. We've got transmission lines, right, that lose things along the way. So even though we work really hard to make our energy system as efficient as possible, there's always kind of waste that occurs here. Other kind of high-level things that are interesting to focus on here, Oregon does produce some in-state renewable energy, primarily stuff that goes to electricity, so hydro, wind, and biomass, while our energy imports are primarily either fossil fuel-based raw fuels or electricity that's generated from fossil fuels. And then the electricity that we produce goes to all sorts of different types of end uses, so residential, commercial, and industrial. And while this is like the really high level stuff, the next few slides are gonna go into a few more of the specifics that you can think about, maybe how this is a little bit more directly impactful for you. Okay, so just starting off with kind of our first question, how much energy does Oregon use? This graphic shows our energy use over time from about the 1960s all the way through 2022, which was our latest data available when we developed this report. The teal line is energy use per capita and is reflected with the right side y-axis. The total energy consumption altogether is the darker blue kind of navy line and is represented on the left y-axis. And you can see that kind of through the 1960s, 70s, even up into the 80s, our energy consumption was growing and growing and growing. There was a sharp decline in 89, and then it's been relatively constant since then. That sharp decline came about during the time when we transitioned from wood and fuel oil to more natural gas and electricity use. And then you can also see kind of how this compares to per capita use. So even though Oregon has grown in the last 20 years, we've had increasing population, our energy use per capita has gone down, so our energy use in total has remained fairly flat. We can also think about kind of where this energy is used. So we know we are using quite a bit of energy. Where does it go, though? And it's split up primarily across 4 sectors. So you can see transportation is the largest sector of energy use at about 36.7%, and then followed by industrial, residential, and commercial, which kind of all make up kind of smaller shares of the pie as you go along there. I'm going to get into some of the fuels that are used in these in some subsequent slides, but kind of at a high level, this is where our energy is going here in Oregon. Now that we think about where it's going, where does it come from? And I'm going to split this up by thinking about kind of electricity, then direct use, and then transportation fuels. So our electricity mix is quite the mix of different things, as you can see from all of these different bubbles here. Hydro is our largest electricity source at about 33.5%, followed by natural gas and coal. I'm going to ignore the brown unspecified bubble for a second and come back to that. And then you can see we do have quite a bit of other renewables in our mix too. Wind, nuclear, and solar are there. The hydro is mostly stuff that we produce here in Oregon, whereas the coal and the natural gas are things that are primarily imported. And some of you may be kind of vaguely aware that Oregon has a coal to clean bill set to end the date for coal serving Oregon customers, meaning that post-2030, most, if not all, of that coal bubble will be gone from this graphic. But right now, that coal is from stuff that we import. Circling back to that brown bubble for a second, our electric utilities here in Oregon have kind of 3 ways to get our electricity to us. They can have long-term contracts with other entities, in which case we know pretty well where they're getting their electricity from and what that generation resource is. They can produce it themselves, in which case we know exactly where that came from, or they can buy it on the open market. So usually that's kind of in the hours leading up to when they need that electricity to get to their end user. They can buy it on the market, and that electron will make its way from wherever it's coming from here to an Oregon household. Because that's a big market operator who does that, it's very hard to trace exactly where that electron that ended up in Oregon started out. So we don't have a good sense of what the generation resources are that make up those market purchases. So currently, that's a brown bubble of unspecified. There is work going into trying to understand better, though, what's going into those market purchases in the future. Electricity isn't the only energy we use, though, so we'll move on then to thinking about some of our other energy uses. So direct use fuel consumption. This shows that use in fuel over time from, again, like 1960 onwards. And you can see here that the mix of what we use has changed some over time. It used to be the case that, let's see if I can figure out the pointer. Heating oil and other petroleum were a larger share of our direct use fuels. That's gone down over time as we've started to rely more on this kind of tannish biomass and especially natural gas, which is that kind of pinkish magenta color at the top here. So we've had some transition in that over time as prices for different things have changed, as we've discovered new natural gas in the US and been able to rely more heavily on those other resources. Transportation's a little bit different. We've had kind of the same resources for a long time. We've just seen increased use of them as our population has grown. So the yellow line here is our gasoline use, purple is diesel, and you can't really see them well at all, but at the very bottom here, there's a few of the newer resources that are starting to come in more. So things like, you guys probably all see at the pump, right, that ethanol blends are more common these days. That's kind of ticking up in the bottom part there. We are seeing more adoption of electric vehicles in Oregon, so electricity is down there somewhere, but increasing over time. They're just kind of dwarfed by our gasoline use, so you can't see them very well. Okay, so that's kind of overall what we have here that we use, but what do we produce here in Oregon? This probably comes as no shock. About 50% of what we produce is hydro. A lot of the remaining is biomass, and then after that, it's kind of our other renewable resources, wind, solar, and geothermal. All of those, along with hydro, are used to produce electricity, and then biomass is used kind of in part to produce renewable fuels, but also is used through combustion to produce heat and electricity as well. We also, you may not know, have about 90,000 people in energy industry jobs in Oregon. The bulk of these jobs are in energy efficiency, so this includes things like high efficiency and traditional HVAC, as well as renewable heating and cooling firms and other specialized areas. We also have about 25,000 folks in motor vehicle jobs, which includes manufacturing, distribution of parts, and plug-in hybrid electric, battery electric, and hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. For all industries, so everything from like large-scale industrial vehicles to recreational vehicles like golf carts. We also employ about 25,000 folks in traditional energy jobs, so power generation, fuels, and transmission, distribution, and storage. This would include folks working like in solar or wind or hydro, woody biomass, or kind of the traditional distribution, transmission, and storage, like linemen. So we have quite a few of those jobs as well. Okay, since I'm an economist, I obviously have to talk about money at some point here too. So Oregon has all these resources, we use all this energy, but how much are we spending on energy over time? We can see here that if you don't adjust for inflation, these are all nominal numbers, that energy expenditure has increased over time. Kind of the most interesting part of this graph, I think, is right at the end, where you can see that there's a dip in that use in 2020 when we saw kind of less transportation energy needs, and then that really sharp spike right back up in 2021 and 2022, where vehicle miles traveled, rebounded, and we saw the price of gas increasing with kind of global changes in gas prices from all sorts of different things. So while kind of our other sectors have remained fairly steady through that time, the transportation sector kind of is what drove those changes in energy expenditures at the end of like 2020 to 2022. We can also think about this kind of by fuel type. So petroleum is the highest amount that we spend, or the type of fuel that we spend the most on here. So that is mostly because of what we just talked about, right? It's global prices that set that. It's not kind of things that are more stable and more under our control. And so that tends to be our highest area of spending. Electricity kind of comes in next. It's a bit more stable because it's not subject to some of that global price volatility, but those prices are increasing as well, something we'll cover in a few more slides. And then kind of followed by that is natural gas, which is kind of similar to electricity in some ways, staying fairly stable, but it's increasing over time still. You can also see, kind of looking at the pie graph on the right, we talked about already that the transportation sector is kind of 36.5% of our total energy consumption, but they kind of have this outweighed amount of our energy expenditures because petroleum is more expensive than some of our other energy resources. Okay. Kind of want to take this from the high level now down to the individual. So this is what Oregon in total pays, but what about the average Oregonian? And I'm going to warn you ahead of time, these numbers are already out of date, right? Because things change all the time. So these are 2022 numbers, the latest that was available when we were writing our report. But as of that date, the average annual electricity cost for Oregonians was about $1,300. Average annual natural gas costs were about $787. And average annual vehicle miles traveled costs, which includes fuels, maintenance, and repairs for cars, was about $3,300. In addition to kind of caring about what the average Oregonian pays, we also have been trying to focus in a bit more on those who are most vulnerable to changes in prices for energy. So the most common metric used to kind of think about these distributional impacts is energy burden, which is defined as a household that spends 6% or more of their income on energy costs. In Oregon, 28.4% of households are estimated to be energy burdened. And then the map to the right shows the intersection of those who face this high energy burden, along with being 200% of or below the federal poverty line. So you can see that kind of in the south and eastern parts of Oregon, we have kind of higher energy burden, particularly amongst this more vulnerable group, but that really throughout, I mean, even the lowest category here of 18 to 29% is still 18 to 29%. So this is a concern in kind of all parts of Oregon. And that brings me to my next topic then, kind of diving into this Energy 101 about recent electricity rate increase drivers. So before I get into kind of the details of this, I just want to make two kind of upfront comments. First, affordability is a problem statewide, and this article was focused on statewide drivers, so I'm not going to be talking about any specific utilities or any specific rate process cases. More, this is kind of a general picture of what overall is kind of driving these rate increases. Also, this is going to focus on residential rates. Commercial rates are usually a little bit lower than residential rates, but I won't have that information through this part of the presentation. Okay, so as you've probably seen in the news or noticed in your own bills, electricity prices for consumers have been increasing recently. As of the time of this article being written, and the window that we were looking at from January 2020 to January 2024, not every Oregon utility had raised rates, but many had during that kind of time window. On average, rates went up from about 10.5 cents per kilowatt hour to more than 13.5 cents per kilowatt hour. And while Oregon is not alone in seeing these rate increases, Oregon was kind of among the states with a higher rate increase than some others. There's still about 8 to 10 states that saw even faster rate increases, but Oregon was kind of on the high end of that. Because Oregon has traditionally had such low average rates, our current average rate still comes in below the national average, which is at 15.5 cents per kilowatt hour. But that's, again, this is averages, right? So we're here in PGE area where our rates are a little bit higher than that. So you're going to see variation across Oregon. In general, this information and the folks who are feeling this in their household and budgeting has left a lot of people wondering what's driving these price increases, and there's kind of so much information about this, it can be hard to sort it all out sometimes. So we're going to just focus in on kind of 3 of the primary drivers here. First one is rising power costs. So like I said, to provide power to consumers, utilities typically buy power from other power producers, either through those direct contracts or on the market, or they produce them on their own. They produce that electricity on their own. Probably most of you are aware that in Oregon, we don't have competitive markets for electric utilities. Instead, we have regulated monopoly utilities. And the 3 investor-owned electric utilities in the state, PacifiCorp, PGE, and Idaho Power, are therefore subject to regulation by the Oregon Public Utility Commission. So anytime that they want to change their rates, they have to obtain a review and approval of those rates from the Oregon Public Utility Commission. When deciding whether to approve a proposed rate adjustment, the Public Utility Commission is obligated to ensure the change is fair and reasonable for utility customers, and to allow the utility service providers the opportunity to recover reasonable costs and earn a reasonable return on its investment. Investor-owned utilities, like I said, mostly get their power through these contracts, through the market, or through producing it, and all three of those have seen increases in those costs in the last few years in particular. Market purchases are getting more expensive when we have these high demand periods more often, so you might think back to last year when we had that cold snap in February. When we have that elevated demand for that long period of time, market prices go up and our utilities have to pay those market prices when they need those resources. Also, the fuels that we use to produce electricity have increased in price over time as well. Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2020 is one of the types of contributors to these increased prices there, as well as supply chain delays that I'm sure you all are familiar with, but it comes into our power costs as well, which I think leads really nicely into the next cost driver, which is grid investments and inflation as we try and re-up our infrastructure. So at the same time as we're seeing these inflationary pressures, we're also seeing a lot of grid infrastructure that needs replacing because it's just reached the end of its useful life. Central Electric Cooperative put together this really nice graphic because I don't know about you guys, but before I joined Odo, I didn't have a lot of sense of what the types of things are that go into our grid. But they compared some of the inflation that we've seen in those categories to some of the inflation that we've seen in categories that maybe you're more familiar with. And you can see that they are facing the same inflationary pressures that any of us are as households or businesses. And maybe more so, a lot of these have higher rates of inflation than kind of our common goods. And probably have a good sense of why, right? Some of the inputs to those are some of the supply chains that were most disrupted. Finally, the last cost driver is just needing to do more mitigation efforts around wildfires and extreme weather as these become more imminent threats. So some of this mitigation includes increased vegetation management, investments in hardening our infrastructure, so undergrounding lines, and then replacing damaged equipment. There has been some questions about whether House Bill 2021, which has a target to achieve 100% clean electricity for the large utilities by 2040, is a common cost driver. At the time of the writing of this article, HB 2021 was not a direct driver of recent rate increases, but it will likely have future cost impacts for customers, and the cost of new electricity resources, which are non-emitting and will help PGE meet its HB 2021 clean energy targets, even since this article came out, have gone into rates. So we're kind of starting to see that transition as utilities work to meet that goal. But there is, I guess, just a reminder too that HB 2021 does have a cost cap and a reliability cap. So kind of thinking about those future potential costs, there are some mitigation factors put into the bill already. Okay. While rising prices are a matter of statewide interest, I want to also recognize that there is a lot that's being done to try and mitigate price increases. I don't know how much folks in this hall are following kind of the legislative process right now. There's a lot of bills that have to do with this topic. Oregon Public Utility Commission is implementing the Energy Affordability Act of 2021, which has delivered tens of millions in relief to income qualified ratepayers. And there's numerous energy efficiency and weatherization programs that are going in to try and help to ensure that folks have access and affordable energy services. So there's lots being done. There's probably lots more that needs to be done though too. Okay, I'm gonna switch gears here quickly. I realize I'm a little bit over time, so I will keep going quickly through this next part. Energy resilience is another topic that we covered in the biennial energy report. This is, I think, one of those words that gets kind of thrown around a little bit, and at least until I joined the Oregon Department of Energy, I wasn't totally sure exactly what resilience meant, so I'm just gonna read the definition here quickly so we're all on the same page. So energy resilience refers to the ability to withstand and rapidly restore energy delivery following non-routine disruptions of severe impact or duration. So this is kind of thinking about those resilience events and how governments, communities, and energy providers can try and increasingly adopt strategies and options that can make us and our grid more resilient. The importance of energy resilience has gotten kind of more attention in recent years because we've been facing more of these instances as we see extreme weather events and things like that, and also because we recognize that today, maybe differently than 20, 30, 40 years ago, so many of our essential services rely on this energy. So emergency response, medical care, heating and cooling, which is vital to keeping people healthy, all of this relies on our energy system, and so we need to have a resilient energy system. Some of the things that go into creating better energy resilience is things like upgrading older infrastructure to more durable and resilient equipment, undergrounding power lines like we kind of talked about in the last section, so that they're better able to withstand those weather events. If you put the line underground, the tree can't fall on it, right? And then also implementing systems that are more segmented so that we can isolate the impacted areas when we do need to shut off electricity or power. Community level actions can also be taken though, so communities can provide resilience centers that are supplied with backup power for folks if they need that kind of temporary relief because their power went out. There's also more and more communities that are developing solar and battery storage projects so that they have that resilience for their community. And there's more infrastructure going into getting households equipped with some of these resilience efforts too, and businesses. This is the slide that I meant to be on during that talk. I'll quickly go over our last two projects then. So we just recently submitted, I guess September 30th, so it's been a minute now, our first energy security plan to the US Department of Energy and the Oregon Legislature. This plan includes information about the energy system in Oregon and includes electricity, natural gas, and liquid fuels, and focuses on risk assessment for potential natural hazards. This was completed in conjunction with some of our sister agencies, so Oregon Public Utility Commission, as well as informed by public and stakeholder engagement. And we'll be reviewing and updating as necessary this energy security plan every year. And we're also right in the middle currently of our Oregon Energy Strategy project. So this project is meant to identify pathways for the state to meet its many policy goals. So things like meeting our clean energy goals, maintaining affordability and reliability, strengthening our economy, and prioritizing equity, trying to balance the benefits and minimize any harms that can come as we try and make sure that we have a good energy system 25 years from now. We are kind of smack dab in the middle of this project at the moment, so we've worked with stakeholders on developing inputs and assumptions for our modeling exercise that looks at how we might meet our energy needs out to 2050. And with those outputs from that modeling exercise, now we're engaging in conversations around policy development for kind of what we need to do then to try and meet some of these goals, knowing what we know from this modeling exercise, as well as all sorts of other things like people's lived experience, other reports, and research on the topic. If you're interested in learning more about this, I definitely recommend you go to our website, check out the page. There's all sorts of information about what we've been talking about. There's the model results. You can watch the presentation of the model results. So I know that's a little like getting in the weeds and nerdy on energy, but if you have interest, definitely recommend checking it out. Okay, I will just wrap up here quickly with a few resources. I'm happy to share these slides after if they haven't already been shared. And also note that we're just already looking for topics for our 2026 Biennial Energy Report. So if anything here sparked your interest of, hey, I'd love to learn more about this other topic, feel free to shoot us an email and we'd be happy to think about like adding that to our mix of articles for 2 years from now, or I guess a year away now. Thank you.
Well, there was a lot of information on those slides, But all of it very pertinent, all of it very valuable, and something for us to digest in the days, weeks, months ahead, especially as we go into the summertime and start using our air conditioners and other type of energy consumptive and driving more too. So one of the challenges that we'll be facing. So Nina, it's your turn if you want to come on up, and we'll let you have the floor.
Hello all. Thank you guys for having me here today. Mary, I really appreciated your very informative and very graphic heavy presentation. You now know probably more than most people about the energy system, at least on the electric side. Maybe something folks don't talk about quite as much is the gas system and what it does. So why don't we kick it off giving you a little bit of background, and then we'll dive into some of the new technologies and new things that we're working on. Okay, first slide. How, am I moving it or is someone moving? Okay. Oh, look at this. This is technology and everything. Okay, so this is real simple. We're going to talk a little bit about Northwest Natural. We're going to talk a little bit about how much energy we actually provide, why that's important to you, and the decarbonization and things that we're doing to address climate change, not unlike what Mary talked about with House Bill 2021 on the electric side. Okay, so our starting point, who are we? Northwest Natural serves about 2.5 million customers in the state. We go all the way out to the Gorge and the Dalles, to the coast, down past Newport, and then down just past Eugene. So we serve over 50% of the state's population. And one of the exciting things is we have one of the most modern and tight systems in the nation. It's mostly coated steel and poly, which is that yellow pipe. That's going to become important in a minute. And one of the things that makes us particularly proud is we talked about line losses and efficiency rates from electrons. You know, you generate it up maybe up in Port Westward and you send it across lines and it gets to your house some way. And the electricity, a lot of it, in fact, people maybe don't know this, the largest user of natural gas in the state is not actually our company. It would be a large electric producer. And they use a molecule of natural gas at about a 38 to 40% efficiency. Northwest Natural, with its tight modern system, brings that gas to your home in the high 90% efficiency. So for every electron that's being generated using natural gas, it's taking 2 to 3 molecules of natural gas, which we would bring to your home without really any loss. So that's really an important thing to think about. The nice thing about that is you as customers have already invested in that system, and it's going to allow us to bring new technologies to you. So one of the key things on any given average day, Northwest Natural provides about 74% of the space and water heat needs for our customers. On that really cold morning when the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing, Northwest Natural could be providing up to 90% of that space and water energy. The way to think about that, kind of to quantify it, is if you were to take out all the equipment of people's houses and put in the highest efficiency electric equipment, you would have to double the hydro that we have today. If you put in average efficiency, you'd have to triple the hydro. How many of you guys think we're going to build more dams? Yeah. So another way to think about it is Northwest Natural, if you were to replace what we bring to your home underground with solar panels, you'd have to cover all of Multnomah County in solar panels. And a lot of times with solar and wind, you have to do 2 to 3 times the amount of solar and wind to be able to make sure that you can hit those peak times. The nice thing about gas, we can ramp it up or ramp it down. We have storage up in the northwest corner of the state, so we're pretty well set up to be reliable and be bringing you the commodity that you've come to rely on. A lot of folks, we talked a little bit about rate increases, and yes, rates have gone up on the gas side as well. But however, today people are paying approximately what they paid in their gas bill, what they paid 15 years ago. Because the commodity, the actual cost of gas, we found more efficient ways of extracting it and bringing it to you. So the actual commodity cost has really dropped in the last years. We have had increases in in workers and in different equipment and things like that. Yes, those prices have gone up, but if you were to go drag out your bills from the early 2000s, you would probably find that you're paying about the same, which isn't bad for today. Oh, and I talked about all the energy that we're bringing to you guys. The key thing about that, our residential customers, all of the greenhouse gases in the entire state, our residential customers, over half the state's population, about 5% of the greenhouse gas emissions. So that's a pretty big chunk of energy for a fairly low emissions profile. So this kind of shows you a little bit about the demand in natural gas and different energy sectors. You can see that a certain sector, the yellow sector, has really increased. That is the use of natural gas in electric generation. So that's important to think about. As they retire coal and other things, where you're getting a lot of your electricity from is the use of our product. You see the purple section, or the green section, that is residential gas use. And the reason, even with the increase in population, that has stayed pretty flat is that homes today are built much more tighter and much more efficient. So the actual average home is using less of our product. And that's why we're able to spread that out over more folks. And this is a little bit of a representation of what you can, so you can understand how much energy our company brings to people in Oregon. Early this year, we had a really cold morning. We were bringing 70% of the energy in our area, 30% was in electricity, and that's Oregon and Washington. But I just want you to kind of think about, you don't see the gas system. I know you see transformers and you see power lines. You don't see the gas system, so people don't think about it. It is really important, and it really is something you've invested in as customers, and it's something that we're going to need going forward, because I don't know how we're going to replace that much power with wind and solar and not have our prices go up. So we at Northwest Natural have been in Oregon for 165 years. We're the second oldest company in the state, and in our time, we have really done a lot of things. We're not what I would say your father or your grandfather's gas utility. Some of the things that we're particularly proud about is we were one of the first gas utilities to do decoupling, and what that basically means is the commodity or the gas that you use, we purchase that on the market as advantageously as possible, and we bring it to your home, and we do not upcharge you on that. The company makes money on the infrastructure we have in the ground, but the key thing about us bringing that to you at cost, it allows us to work with you to make sure that energy efficiency is important and you're using as little of our product as possible so your bills stay low and we still make a profit. So that's a good thing. One of the other things, too, we talked about one of the tightest systems in the 90s. We had worked with customers and regulators to finish the modernization of our system, which is going to allow us to do a couple things we'll talk about in a minute. And we have really been one of the first utilities to, I would say, aggressively try and incorporate renewable natural gas, which we'll talk about a little bit more, and hydrogen on our system, which will allow us to bring you the same product that you've come to depend upon, but have a lower carbon footprint in using that product. Oops. So just so we're clear here, I'm not here to tell you that climate change isn't real. I'm not here to debate climate change. Everyone has their own opinions on it. Northwest Natural is addressing climate change. We believe that there is an imperative. We believe that our product is needed, but we've got to do it in the most environmentally sensitive way possible. But at the same time, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We've invested in a system. We can make incremental changes to bring down the carbon footprint, but still be reliably and safely delivering the energy in the quantities people need. And I think that you'll see reliability, and I talked a little bit about this before. You have to build your energy systems for peak, so when everybody's using that energy all at the same time, when it's really cold and dark, you've got to be prepared for that. That means that you have to have dispatchable energy, being able to turn it up or push it out when you need it. And that's really where the gas system shines. So this is what we call our SimCity slide. And thank you for those of you, if you know, you know, I guess. But just like on the electric side, there are some real innovations that are happening on the gas side. And what you're going to see is when there's excess electricity generated, perhaps even like a day like today when the sun's really shining but it's not cold so people aren't using power, the electric grid can only hold so much. One of the things that you can do with that excess electricity, you can subject it to a water bath, and you can use that excess electricity to separate water molecules, creating hydrogen. That hydrogen can be put on our modern system, mixed with the natural gas, and it can deliver you the same energy that you're expecting, but with a lower carbon footprint. And if you didn't use that electricity, you'd lose it. And one way to think about I know that Mary talked about batteries on the electric side. The gas system can hold that energy not just for a couple hours or a couple days, it can hold it for months. So you're going to see more hydrogen blending on our system. And then the other big thing would be renewable natural gas. So I don't know how many of you guys remember your chemistry from high school, but when anything that has carbon in it decomposes, it releases methane. You're going to see that in wastewater treatment plants. You're going to see that in landfills. You're going to see that at dairies. You're going to see that anytime anything rots, it releases methane. What we're able to do, especially in areas like, let's say, a dairy lagoon or a landfill, we're able to aggregate that methane, and instead of letting it just be flared or off-gassed into the atmosphere, we can collect that, clean it, and inject it on our pipeline. When I first started doing these presentations, I can remember there were 113 projects in the United States. Now you can see that there's probably at this point about 900. And typically, I mean, I think we all agree that you don't increase the number of projects in that short of time without it having a market for the product and being a good idea. So you're going to see more of this. And right now, we are working to put more renewable natural gas on our pipeline. And we created some legislation, Senate Bill 98, that gives us the legislative and the Public Utility Commission authority to be able to do that. And then we talked about clean hydrogen. There's multiple ways to separate the hydrogen atoms from water, from CH4, which is what methane is. And that's the other thing that you're going to see. We are piloting lots of different technologies right now. We have what they call a methane pyrolysis, and I'm going to get probably over my skis pretty darn quick on this one. But it basically splits your methane molecule. The carbon, instead of letting it go into the atmosphere, which is what we don't want, it forms like a powder, like a carbon graphite, and you're able to use that in tires and in asphalt. And then you're left with the hydrogen, which we can blend with the remaining methane, bringing you the same product you expect and having a lower carbon footprint. And right now we have been blending in our Sherwood Training Center up to 15%. And the nice thing about that, our system can hold up to about 20% blend before you would notice any difference in your equipment. So it's not like you're going to have to go change equipment or burner tips. It's just something that we can add to make kind of like the ethanol in your gasoline. Oops. And so we are doing the blending in our Sherwood facility, but additionally, we're working with technology, folks that are really on the cutting edge of technology. This one would be Modern Hydrogen. And that's the company that's creating the carbon graphite and then using that in asphalt. We're blending that in our Sherwood facility and in around in our Portland facility and around the neighborhoods around that to kind of pilot out the equipment to make sure that this works and that it can scale up. So there are lots of different ways we're working on that energy efficiency and the decarbonization. So the key thing for us will be not just heat pumps, but gas-fired heat pumps and different equipment, better building codes, and lower carbon footprint for the gas that we deliver today. So that's the basics on where we're at. The most important thing for you guys to know is we have ample supplies of natural gas. The prices are maintaining a good price, and we'll be able to deliver it to you guys safely, reliably, and it's really the power that your cities and counties are going to need if they want to recruit businesses, and it's still a consumer preference. We're here, and we're planning to stay for at least another 165 years. So that's it. Thank you.
I'd like to have both you and Mary come up. And I'll stand over here and ask the questions, and then we'll let each of you determine who's best to respond, or both of you. But I did want to say my wife loves her gas cooktop, so I'm glad to know that she doesn't have to tear that out.
Not for 165 years.
Okay, thank heavens. That'll make her very happy. Okay, if you two want to go stand over here, and you're going to bring another microphone up for them. Oh, share a microphone. Okay, well, that's fine. All right. So, blue cards. Let's see. How are we going to make up for loss of coal? How is wood converted to electricity?
Yeah, right. Excellent question. It will be, up to the electric utilities how they engage new resources for meeting that electricity need as we phase out coal. Natural gas will almost certainly be part of that mix, as well as other renewable sources. Like you mentioned, I don't think we're going to be building new dams anytime soon, so it'll likely be solar and wind resources either here in Oregon or imported from elsewhere, as well as potentially new resources as we look farther into the future, thinking kind of maybe more geothermal or other kind of emerging technologies.
Okay, Nina, anything on that?
I would just say the nice thing with our product, we have the storage facilities that really allow us to buy when the market is low, when they need to get gas off the pipeline. We can buy it, we can store it, and then when there's a higher need but prices might be higher on the market, we're able to pull it out of storage. That's one of the ways we price shave for our customers here, and we're one of only 2 places on the West Coast that have the geological structure that allow us to store gas safely.
All right. Does Canada have an effect on the supply and price of gas in the Northwest?
We are not going to say the tariff word today again. Yes, I mean, a good portion, I want to say it's 60-some% of our gas does come out of the Alberta region of Canada. If these tariffs are in place for a longer time, there will be impacts. We're trying to figure out what that is now. Again, it may be a place where our storage is super helpful.
Okay, and due to the fact that Northwest Natural Gas's reach does go quite a ways south in our region, do you have storage capacity in the southern part of the state?
So one of the other ways that our system is a pressurized system, so it pushes the gas to where it needs to go. So at the very edges, that's where we kind of worry about pressure. One of the ways that we make sure that we can deliver where we need to is we have a liquid natural gas storage facility in Newport, and we also have one down in the Critical Energy Hub in Portland. There are these big tanks, it's cooled down and it's actually liquid. The thing that's different about our product than, say, other products, if we had a big Cascadia event, we don't necessarily know how everything's going to fare, but if our product is exposed to air, it doesn't go into the water, it evaporates. So that's one of the good things. Would we want all that gas into the atmosphere at one point in time? No. But the key thing is it wouldn't be a long-term ecological disaster from our product.
Okay. The topic of new technologies was mentioned, and fusion was one of the words. Is that nuclear fusion?
I will have to ask my technical experts back at Odo. Thank you for the question. I will have to ask our tech experts. That is not me.
Well, I will just add that right now there is a bill in the state constitution because of Trojan. We are not allowed to have nuclear facilities in the state, but there is legislation in Salem right now to do an exploratory project. Probably isn't a bad idea, being that one of the companies that is farthest along with the small modular nukes is in Tigard, and the technology was actually created at Oregon State University. So I suspect you're going to be seeing more about that, especially as the need for data centers really have expanded need for electricity that we probably don't want to necessarily pay for as ratepayers, and they need it, yesterday.
I don't think I mentioned the nuclear that's in the little bubble graphic. That is imported nuclear because we don't have sites here.
And Nina, I'm glad you brought up the topic of data centers because we've had fairly stable electrical rates since 2010, and then all of a sudden we started seeing these spikes over the last few years, and much of I'm going to use the word blame, but I'll just say the cause and effect of those rate increases seems to be coming from high technology companies needing data centers, and that's why you see the Amazons and the Googles going out to Prineville, where you've got tremendous amount of power from water sources and other major BPA high transmission lines. One of the issues, though, that we just saw recently in Portland was the desire to run new transmission lines through Forest Park. It did get approved, but I read about a new technology called conductors that can go ahead and increase the capacity of the existing transmission lines by up to 50%, and doesn't need any permitting and doesn't need any environmental impact reports. It's just working with existing transmission lines. Are you familiar, Mary, with conductors?
Yeah, that's actually been a big part of our Oregon Energy Strategy modeling, too, has shown that there is potentially a good use of this reconductoring technology in our state to be able to use these transmission lines more efficiently going forward as we do see load or demand for electricity increasing with new data centers, as well as kind of just increased, if we see more EVs in the future, we'll have increased electricity demand there too.
Well, and I just would like to add, I don't know how many of you guys have heard about some of the different jurisdictions, maybe one in Clackamas County a couple years ago, talking about banning gas in new construction. And the city of Eugene passed an ordinance that did that. It was overturned. Berkeley was the place that it started. Other jurisdictions brought it into their communities, and Eugene was the only one in our state that had passed it. That was overturned, so that was not allowed. But I guess here's what I want to emphasize to you. You saw how much energy that we are currently providing for our region. We have a lot of new technologies that are coming on both on the electric and gas side. We can't afford to get rid of any of our energy right now. We need all of the things, and we need to do it thoughtfully, and we need to bring in new technologies, and we need to think about the environment. But with the demands, the growth in EVs, the growth in our population, maybe not in the Portland metro area as much, but with all the things, data centers and the like, we're not in any place that we can say no to a particular type of energy. And if we were to do that, we would have an there would be economic pain for every one of us.
I'll just add quick plug for looking at the Oregon Energy Strategy too. We did hear quite a bit of feedback that folks wanted to see high forecasts for data center growth in our modeling for thinking out to 2050, and so we did do that in the energy strategy. And so if you are curious about what the least cost modeling would say is the generation mix that we might use to meet that demand in the future, I definitely recommend going and checking it out. It is a big mix of different
I don't think they're going away. And I do know in the legislature right now, one House bill and one Senate bill have been introduced by different legislators that would cap how much residential ratepayers would be charged by the increased demand of data centers in that industrial sector. So we'll see how the PUC responds to all that.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, can you describe more of what happened from your graph you had up in 1989 when we converted from, I think you said, fossil fuels and wood to other type of energy sources?
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely start that, but my co-panelist here might have even more to say. But yeah, in the 1980s, 89, is when kind of natural gas really took off. We had new technologies developed so that we could deliver it more cheaply and efficiently there. And so that was kind of when we made that switch from some of our older fuels like fuel oil, I believe, was kind of one of the main ones there, to natural gas, which was more readily available then. Do you want to add anything?
Well, I would just say we keep pretty good eye on the building market, and to this right now, not in your lowest, like most affordable, like apartment type things, but for new construction, residential, I would say it's in the high 80s to low 90% of homes have natural gas, and that's that's allowed the electricity companies to focus on the lights and the other things like that. It's a lot of the heat load and the water heating load is fueled by direct use of natural gas in homes, and we see that trend continuing because people like that. And right now, one of the bigger growth areas for us is in backup generators, because yes, battery generation's nice, or a gasoline generator is okay, but a natural gas generator, barring a Cascadia event, we don't really have problems performing in ice storms, windstorms, or other things like that. The gas is underground, and it's going to be there fueling your generator most likely when you need it.
That is so true. I agree with you 100%.
And folks in this area probably do know a little bit about power outages more than most.
Yes. So, because, Nina, your presentation was so effective, one of our attendees is asking, is the Northwest Natural Gas presentation going to be also presented to the state legislature?
Well, they're probably tired of seeing us and our lobbyists. That's the thing. We talk about things to our legislators. We try and help their energy IQ be higher. Unfortunately, a lot of times we're lobbyists, and they know that we're paid to be down there. If this stuff is important to you and you want to maintain your energy choice, I ask you to make sure that your city councils, your elected leaders, know your preference and that you want to make those choices for your family. And if they're going to make changes or pass different laws, that they really need to model things out, both for reliability and resiliency, but for cost and what it's going to do to the bottom line of families.
Okay. And I'm not sure this question happens as much in our region as it does in other parts of the country. What about fracking? Erroneous amounts of H2O and chemicals are used. How are you reducing or improving fracking to reduce environmental impacts?
And that's really important. Part of the reason that gas prices have really moderated is because of the horizontal and then directional drilling. Just so you know, there is no gas that is extracted in Oregon. We have the old gas storage wells that we store things, but the key thing, we source all of our gas through in a consortium called One Future, which if you look it up, it's just, I think, onefuture.com, maybe .org. But the key thing is they have really, really strict emissions requirements, and they require the use of best technology from extraction through transmission. We're proud members of this, and their fugitive emissions are less than, I think, half of 1% per year, where other extraction sources and methodologies might be 2 or 3%. So we're really very focused on that, A, for the environment, but B, a molecule of methane that escapes into the atmosphere, we aren't delivering to you, and there's no recovery on it. So it's two reasons why it's important. A, we have to be good environmental stewards. We only have one Earth. And additionally, we want to make sure anything that is extracted is done so in an environmental way and brought to you efficiently and without much loss.
Okay, thank you. Mary, this one's for you. The first graph that you showed revealed that all fossil fuels were going to waste. Can you explain? I'm not sure that's exactly the way you presented it.
No, that Sankey diagram is very hard to follow. I debated putting that first, but I feel like it kind of shows how complicated the system is. But that is certainly not the case, that all fossil fuels are going to waste. The lines kind of come and go and cross, and they're all, I don't know, snaking over each other in the Sankey diagram, right? But certainly there's waste from any type of energy that we use. Some of that natural gas that goes to electricity will go into waste there. Some will go directly. Some will go from solar to waste. You know, they all kind of had a pathway towards waste, but fossil fuels aren't going directly to waste. They're going into end uses first and partly into waste.
And one other thing, America, we do things great here, but it's always good to look outside of our country to see other technologies. And one of the places that we've really been impressed with, we've taken legislators over there, we're working with some of our economic development and industrial coalitions, would be a thing called industrial symbiosis. So basically what it does, it takes waste heat or a waste product from an industrial user and co-locates other users around there, so you can pipe one person's waste as another person's feedstock. And I think you're going to see more of that, especially as we bring in larger industrial or areas that for industrial development. The idea will be, if someone locates, what do they have? Like, for instance, data centers use a lot of power, but they generate a lot of heat. Can you capture that heat and use it to do something else, dry something, heat something? I think we're going to be much more intentional and long-range planning on some of our industrial development with industrial symbiosis. The Denmark really has doubled down on it. It's pretty impressive, some of the things they've been able to do.
And I think that's where the utilization of battery storage, whether it's your hydrogen batteries or electrical batteries, can use a lot of this exhausted waste and recapture that. Do you see the implementation and continued introduction of wind, solar, fusion, catching up to the needs of data centers and AI?
Well, I will just say, frighteningly enough, we haven't had to do this yet because we really don't understand how the compliance on greenhouse gas emissions. But we've had data centers call us up and say, hey, the electric company can't serve our data center until mid-2030s. We're thinking about doing our own gas-fired generation. So they're ready to write 8-figure checks for us to do gas, bring them gas so that they can create their own power on site. That's where we're at. I mean, we're going to need all of the sources. We can get rid of none of the sources, and we're going to have to be more creative on how we use all of the sources. But yeah, there's just a very exponential growth in need, and part of that is because some of the undersea cables come up right in Hillsborough area, and it's one of the kind of the best places that they want to locate because of those undersea cables.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll just add that, yeah, in the energy strategy, we do model that high data center growth, and it does show that we're able to do it. So it's kind of a question of how, right? But we can. And I think that's kind of an optimistic view looking forward, right? But also, I guess I put my economist hat on for a second, right? These big data centers are using a lot of energy today. That's very costly for them as well as costly for us. So I can only imagine that they're looking at ways to reduce their energy use as well. So it'll be interesting to see what actually comes out of all these forecasts and kind of where we land in the future.
Mary, were you surprised when you saw that entities like Amazon wanted to take nuclear facilities out of mothball and restart them?
Yes, yeah, I mean, I think, like Nina mentioned, they're looking for anything they can to get that energy today because they want to start working today. And I think we got to meet with some folks over in Umatilla County and talk to them a little bit about data centers popping up there and what it's been like for their local community and how they've been working to get that electricity to meet those needs. And yeah, it's kind of everyone's just out there doing their best and trying to get that energy how they can.
The positive is obviously that those new technologies benefit tremendously from that power, but they don't really employ that many people, do they, the data centers?
That's true. They don't employ a lot of people. One thing that the folks in Umatilla told us, though, is that the people that they do employ are at pretty high wages, which does kind of come back to their tax base. And now that they are past the time their tax exemption, they are providing quite a bit of tax revenue for the county, which is then able to be invested back in their schools and things like that. So, you know, I am not part of that process at all, but this is kind of what we heard from them when we were talking.
Okay, great. Well, here's another question for you, since you have the microphone. Because there is a price premium on renewable electricity and most is tied up in long-term contracts, isn't it safe to assume that the unspecified electricity in our grid mix is all coal or gas generation?
That's an excellent question, actually. So one of the other articles in the Biennial Energy Report looks at day-ahead markets, and so it looks a little bit at these markets and what they do and where they function and kind of how they work. And because a lot of like solar and wind, for example, don't have any fuel costs, the sun is shining down for free, right? When those resources are available, they're very low cost. And so those are going to be the first things that come up on the market. So there's a good chance that a lot of those market purchases are renewable sources from, you know, solar in California that they can't use and want to send up our way, or wind in Wyoming that they have already, you know, served all their customers and they want to send it our way so that, you know, they can make some money from it. But then, you know, there's times, right, when there's really high demand and there's not enough wind or solar, and then it is probably more fossil fuels.
If I could add one more thing, if you're pitching to your legislators, if we're going to be serious about our decarbonization goals and our use of the increased use of energy and being mindful of cost, we really need to do joint utility planning. You need to have the gas and the electric system side by side, trying to meet the demands most effectively, most environmentally consciously together. And that hasn't happened yet, and if I had a magic wand, that would be the number one thing I think that would probably be most beneficial for Oregonians.
All right, Lena, you've got the microphone, so here you go.
Ready.
How come there is no gas power plant generation shown on your in-state electricity? Well, maybe this is you too, Mary. Sorry, I saw gas, so I thought, okay, this is a NINA question. A gas power plant generation shown on your in-state electricity production slide. Don't we still have in-state gas power plants?
You know, I am not sure about the answer to this question. This might be one for you, Nina. I'm going to play I've only been at Odo for a year card.
Probably one of the largest gas-fired generations, Port Westward up. In fact, the Portland General has a contract for part of our storage. So yes, there is gas generation. I don't believe that there is currently more allowed to be built. However, I believe this is where we're working out with the data centers. Can a high user build their own gas-fired generation? So that is, there's definitely, like I said again, the largest user of natural gas in our state is not actually Northwest Natural. I'll let you figure out who it is.
Okay, well, speaking of Northwest Natural, what are the main sources of natural gas for Northwest Natural?
Again, we source probably 60-some% of our gas, maybe a little bit more out of Canada. The rest comes from the Rockies. So we have two feeds.
Okay, that was a fast answer. How will the huge data center energy demands affect availability of our energy for residential, and what guarantees do we have that we won't have rolling blackouts during high demand peak periods?
I'm going to let you.
Yeah. I guess I can just speak in kind of general terms here, which is that the Public Utility Commission keeps an eye on both prices as well as reliability. So there are, you know, reliability targets that all of our electric utilities need to meet so that as they bring on new customers, they're able to keep reliable resources for all of their other customers as well.
Okay, back to the ban on gas stoves in Eugene, is that still in effect?
There are no bans on any gas appliances in Oregon. In all seriousness, there are none. That was found unconstitutional. That doesn't mean that jurisdictions that are really feel that they need to do something about greenhouse gas emissions, aren't doing other things. The city of Ashland right now has passed an ordinance that basically if you build a house with gas appliances, you're going to pay like a luxury tax or a carbon tax on that that will cover the cost of carbon of those appliances X years forward. And it's pretty expensive. It's gonna be, high 4 figures, maybe low 5 figures. And the key thing that we don't think that that's probably the best way to go is because that makes gas become a luxury item. And folks that have less funds, resources, won't be able to make those energy choices. That is a city council making them for them. And to what effect, to how much greenhouse gas emissions are you actually reducing? That wasn't even modeled.
So speaking, Nina, of energy choices, we've noticed we now have choices in automobiles between gasoline-powered or EV, but I've also seen mass transit evolving into gas-powered. Do you see that trend continuing?
I think there is SMART, which is the transit authority for Wilsonville area. They run all of their buses on compressed natural gas. We are looking at helping them find renewable natural gas, so it would make them probably one of the greenest fleets in the nation. But the thing I think also you're going to see is potentially hydrogen buses. I know that TriMet is looking at potentially doing a hydrogen hub bus station in the Cully neighborhood potentially. So I think that you are going to see a move away even from biodiesel to other sources and the electric buses, while they work in certain situations, they're twice as expensive as a internal combustion engine bus, and they don't go as far. So that's kind of why I think the hydrogen buses, TriMet is looking at those.
Okay. You mentioned earlier the benefits of having the gas lines underground in times of ice storms, windstorms. What about seismic precautions that you need to take in case of a massive earthquake?
Well, I don't even want to talk about a Cascadia event because yes, there probably will be problems. There'll be problems everywhere. But one of the kind of neat things about our system is we have what we call excess flow valves about every third house in the line. If there's a lot of shaking, our system registers that if there's a rupture, there's more gas going through, and it shuts it down automatically. So we have, I would say, pretty good things that are automatically in place. A Cascadia event, that's not something that we can necessarily fully plan for.
I agree, and we do not want to experience that, even though we're close to being way overdue.
We're not talking about that or tariffs today. Those are off the table.
Yep. Obviously, we saw rate increases in the last few years for utilities. How much of that money, or if you're aware of, is being earmarked for maintenance and upgrades versus installation of new facilities?
That is an excellent question. I don't know that number off the top of my head, but I can certainly dig in a little bit and see. The PUC would have all of that information in their dockets. Not all of that is always kind of available for public consumption, so it's possible that I won't be able to dig in, but I'll see what I can find. I also wanted to follow up really quickly on a previous question that you asked about the data center load growth and potential for reliability concerns. One thing that I didn't note then is that data center load growth, or the increased demand there, is very, very predictable. So to the extent that we can think about kind of demand response or ways that the data centers can work with our electricity grid and work with those who are providing generation, it should be a really known quantity that they need. And our electricity companies, are used to kind of having the struggle of variable, and, we didn't expect it to be cold and now it's really cold, or we didn't expect it to be hot and now it's really hot. And they're used to having additional generation to be able to meet that kind of unexpected need and get that really quickly. That's a lot harder than predictable load growth, where you can build out your system because you need to have this higher level over time.
Okay. We've noticed that over the years, more dams are being removed. I'm not sure if any of those are generating power or not, but is the Bonneville Dam still generating the same amount of power for BPA as it has in years past?
Yeah, the thing that is kind of making the biggest difference right now on the amount of hydropower that's available to Oregonians is really the climate, and what we see with like drier years versus wetter years is kind of what creates most of the volatility there, but otherwise it's been very stable.
Okay,
Beyond-
good. And
beyond
that
that.
keeps our rates fairly low.
Correct, in a lot of places that is.
Yeah. Okay, we're getting towards the bottom here. How are we going to make up for loss of coal? How was wood converted to electricity?
I think we covered that one at the beginning. I don't know if I can add any more though.
Well, we did talk a little bit about the conversions and
Yeah.
transferring to a different type when gas came in
Yeah.
a big way.
Well, yeah, and I feel like I'm plugging the energy strategy a lot today. But one of the cool things about the energy strategy is that different from like any specific utility planning is that it looks across the entire energy system. So it thinks about not just how can we get electricity or not just how can we get natural gas where we need it, but kind of how can we develop our entire energy system across all of these different types of resources over time. And if we think about it in that bigger holistic way, kind of how can we be really responsive in the policies that we develop or in the communications that we have across different folks who are trying to provide that electricity or that natural gas or kind of these new hydrogen, low carbon fuels.
And I would respectfully disagree a little bit because we plan for our system, and I know that we can be more efficient if we are compelled to sit down with our partners on the electric side and really map out what the region needs and figure out what is the best electron or what is the best molecule to use, both environmentally and cost-wise. And we aren't compelled to do that. And I do think that that's, if we're going to effectively address greenhouse gas emissions and costs, we're going to need to do that.
Okay, speaking of greenhouse gases, and then we'll close here. I have heard that the greatest impact natural gas has on greenhouse gases is line leakage, not exhaust from burning. Is that true?
Well, I would say depending on your system. A lot of the systems on the East Coast are cast iron and they're old. Our stuff was replaced almost completely in the 1990s. And again, it's poly and coated steel. And we are, again, part of the One Future Consortium is keeping those fugitive emissions at their goal is less than 1%, but it has been less than 0.5% year in and year out. So that's been very important to us. And so I would say other systems may have issues. I feel very confident that ours is probably one of the tightest systems that you're going to find in the United States.
Mary, anything you'd like to add?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay. Well, on behalf of the Oregon City Business Alliance and our attendees here today, I want to thank both of you. You did an excellent job. So much information, and you had answers for every one of the questions. We couldn't stump you. As much as we tried, we couldn't stump you.
Nothing on tariffs. Please, no more on tariffs.
Yeah. Or data centers.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, that was a great presentation. We'll have to have an encore to that topic again next year because I just see that energy consumption and how it's generated and how it's recaptured with new technologies is just something we need to revisit constantly, especially here in the Northwest. So with that being said, next month we're going to hit the topic of the state of the economy. We're bringing in a consultant from